All right. Hey, everybody. My guest today is Greg Atkinson. Greg is known in the world of hospitality, guest services, first impressions for the church, and is the creator of the First Impressions Conference and the founder of Worship Impressions. That's worshipimpressions.com. And it's a professional secret shopper company. That's going to be hard for me to say. Secret shopper. His book, Secrets of a Secret Shopper, is a bestseller on Amazon. Great read. You can learn a whole lot more about him at gregatkinson.com. Please welcome Greg Atkinson.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Glad to be here. Glad we're finally able to make this happen. We've been chatting about it for a couple years.
Absolutely, man. It's been a while. We've been trying to figure out how to get together. 2 years.
Yeah.
It's taken that long.
Yeah.
You're that.
It took COVID and getting me to stop traveling and coming off the road and being grounded, not able to fly. But I'm home now. I'm in my home office, and I'm glad we can make it happen.
Yeah, me too. I just got to ask, doing the secret shopper thing. For those that don't know, secret shopping, what is it? What is that?
Yeah. So, the concept comes from the business world. You have hotels, hospitals, banks, restaurants, retail, department stores. They all have secret shoppers. And so I remember about a year ago, I went to a QT, Quick Trip gas station, and I came up to pay at the counter, and a guy in front of me had left and walked away. And one of the employees turned to the other employee and said that was a secret shopper. And QT, I wrote about them in my last book. They have a great culture, great culture. But I have personally secret shopped restaurants, nice restaurants and hotels. And but I started consulting in 2005. So it's been 15 years of consulting with churches all around North America. But I started Worship Impressions that you referenced, the secret shopper company, in 2009. So it's been 11 years of Worship Impressions being around. And when I go in, I evaluate everything. I start at the beginning of the report. So I'll go in, I'll fly in on a Saturday. If they have a Saturday night service, I'll evaluate and attend the Saturday night service. And then everything they have on Sunday morning. Some have Sunday morning and Sunday night. And then I'll do a lunch with the leadership team and kind of just, I'm very relational, just kind of chat, get to know them, give them some stuff off the top of my head. Then I come back and I work on a very detailed report. My last few reports have been anywhere from 80 to 100 pages. So they're very detailed, very thorough, just going through, breaking down everything. But the first part of the report is an online presence evaluation. And so I do that right here at home in my home office, where I go through and evaluate their social media presence and their website. And so I've been able to continue doing that during this 8 weeks of being off the road. I traveled that last Sunday before most churches shut down. I was in Baltimore working with the church, but I'm still able to secret shop churches online and give them feedback on their online services and their website and helping them tweak their website. I wrote a blog about what your homepage should look like. And
that's
it's a fun experience.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. For you to come in, nobody knows who you are. You're getting the actual raw experience of the place and getting an honest look at where this business company, this church is, and then being able to provide feedback to them. It's interesting now, of course, that COVID is here, that flying around, traveling, you mentioned that's stopped, but you are still able to continue with secret shopping online. And I didn't know that you even did that. I didn't know that was part of it, which makes total sense, that if we're asking pastors and leaders to consider digital as part of the ministry, that would obviously be part of the secret shop as well. Does that ever surprise people when you include that? They were like, oh, we didn't know you were looking at that?
Yeah, I was not the first. I mentioned it, secret shopping came from the business world, and then ever since the maybe 70s or 80s, it's been a concept in the church world. There are people that have written their books on my shelf by secret shoppers in the 80s and the 90s. There are guys who've been doing this for a long time.
That's great.
I'm probably one of the most known ones for it right now, presently, but I was not the first. And I was actually encouraged by a former boss and mentor of mine to become a secret shopper. He's the one that kind of pushed me out of the boat and encouraged me. And so I evaluate everything from the street to the seat. You know, what is parking like, greeters, ushers, welcome center, signage, communications, print pieces, website, directional signage, any kind of anything that could confuse me or confuse a guest. And so I evaluate all of that. But I was not the first to do it. I
Sure.
just ended up putting it in the book, Secrets of a Secret Shopper, and recorded some podcasts about it. And it really kind of blew up where
Yeah.
it really got on a lot of radar because a lot of people didn't realize that churches do that. And what's the heart behind it is I worked with a great a large First Baptist church recently, about 5 or 6 months ago, and they're a well-known church, well-known organization. They host large conferences, and I met with their leadership team, and I went around the room and I said, "How long have you been at First Baptist?" And they were so proud, and they said, "You know, I've been here 20 years." I said, "That's awesome." Somebody else, "I've been here 30 years." That's awesome. Somebody else said, "I grew up here. I've been here my whole life. I'm 60 years old." I said, "That's great. Guess what? You've lost your new eyes."
Yep.
And so what a secret shopper does is we come in with new eyes and say, "Why is this here? What is this? What does that mean? Where does this lead to?" And people are like, "Well, I thought everybody knew that." No, I haven't been here 60 years. I haven't been here 20 years. I haven't been here 30 years. And so
Yeah.
we just kind of give people fresh eyes.
There was a commercial, I don't forget what it was for, maybe plugins or something, and it was about being nose blind to the pile of laundry
Right.
list. And that's kind of what we do. We go nose blind, we go eye blind. That's literal blindness, I guess. We go blind to the things that are going on in our church that we've kind of learned to live with, and
Yep.
others see, and kind of forget the impression it leaves on people and why that's important. And it's super interesting. Like right now, churches being online, I imagine there's still some elements of that hospitality, that first impression, that greeting. Um, the first impressions team is probably going, what do we do for online? How do we handle this right now? So my question is, what are you seeing right now that churches are doing on their live streams or just online in general that is fulfilling that hospitality, greeting, warmth, welcoming kind of feel that you want to get when you actually show up to a building? So what are you seeing them do right now that you think is like, that's innovative or that's good?
Yeah, there's some great churches doing some great stuff, and it doesn't really matter what size they are. They could be a small, medium, a large, very large church. But I'm watching several services a weekend, and churches are doing some excellent stuff. I have a talk that I'm working on that I'm going to speak at Steve Fogg's Church Online Summit next week, and talk a little bit about this. But some of it is the lead pastor himself or herself, whoever is staring down the camera delivering the message, the fact that they're authentic and genuine and relational, relatable, and approachable. So in a piece of authenticity that I talked to somebody about recently on another podcast is one thing I'm a big fan of right now that feels very hospitable and welcoming is when large churches film their online services in smaller venues. And so you have I've seen Jensen Franklin in his living room. I've seen Brian Houston, pastor of Hillsong Church in Australia, in his living room with
Yeah.
a few staff members. And so I've seen J.D. Greer, president of the Southern Baptist Convention, in a small hallway in an intimate setting with a bistro table, not standing on a giant stage in an empty auditorium with 1,000 seats. I've seen people come to smaller, relatable venues, and so that helps me. So for so long, I, as a first impressions guest services guy, have said, companies coming, are we ready? Are we ready? Companies coming, we're going to welcome them into our church. Well, now they are welcoming us into their home, and the tables have turned.
Yeah.
We're going into
Yeah.
their home. And so when we are broadcasting, it's got to come across as relatable, as conversational, and as authentic and genuine. And so if I'm sitting in my home, even if I attend this church and I'm seeing this giant room and this giant empty stage, there's just feels to be kind of a disconnect. So when you bring the venue down to a smaller size and you do something a little bit more intimate, when I watched the Summit Church, we both know Rob Lauder and
Yeah.
what he's doing there with the digital ministry, and they did a great job. I watched their service recently with JD Greer, and he had to help uh, a digital audience in today's world with today's attention span. He broke up the sermon into sections, and so he would preach one part, and then they would do some music, and he'd preach a second part, and then they would do some music, and then he'd preach the third part, and then they would do some music.
That's
And then
great.
when it comes to first impressions, one thing they did that was really awesome to help people feel relational was they had their campus pastors film videos from their home or from their campus saying, "Hey, I'm Greg, and I'm at the Raleigh campus, and I just want to tell you what God's doing in Raleigh and what we're excited about." And then, "Hey, I'm Bob. I'm at the Durham campus, and we're so excited about this happening in our community and this and this and this." And so they had, another great thing that churches are doing that help with first impressions is online hosts, people that kind of MC the service and speak to you and kind of, it's a great opportunity to go into somebody's home. So just kind of being like a tour guide, telling them, hey, we're going to sing for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to listen to a sermon that's based on the Bible, and then constantly giving those opportunities for people to let you know where they're from, or to engage in the chat, or if they have a question, or if they need prayer, or if they want to fill out a connection card. And so just being aware of them in the room. I like to think of the concept that is universal in hospitality of "I see you, I see you." And so we know you're there. We know you're watching. If you want to connect with us, feel free to engage in the chat. Feel free to ask for prayer. Feel free to respond. And so,
It's interesting. It's interesting that you bring that up, is that part of hospitality is just kind of acknowledging some of the things that are there on the digital space. It's like saying, "Hey, engage in the chat," or "I'm over here at this campus and we're glad that you're here. Kind of, here's what's going on, God, what God's doing at our campus or in this city." That kind of thing, just acknowledging them in a very realistic way. I didn't think of that as hospitality, but it really is. It does translate as warmth and welcome in a
yeah.
way to say, we kind of know where you're at right now. We know that we're all there. It's a way to be with them instead of just saying, "We're with you," over and over again. And
Yeah, and it's a beautiful thing to behold when you think of the Big C Church.
mhm,
I every week I watch Elevation Church online with Stephen Furtick, and one thing that they've done for the last 2 months since COVID happened is they have a giant like confidence monitor prompt screen in the back that Stephen Furtick can see and see the chat happening, and so he's engaging with people in real time.
it's
And
good.
he'll say, I see you, Bob, and I see that you're in Tokyo. Glad to have you. Hey, if you think this," and then he'll talk to the camera and just acknowledging that they're in the room and that they're there and they're not. So it's not just a talking head of somebody talking the whole time, never stopping to breathe and to say, "Hey, somebody is watching and engaging."
Yeah, that's great. That's next level. I love that. Talking to the people that are actually there. It's very basic to think, like, if somebody showed up in your lobby, obviously you go talk to them, especially if you're part of hospitality team, greeting team. But even if you're on staff, or even if you're just a regular, you're supposed to do that. But
Yeah,
online, it's like, how does that translate? Well, that's a great way to have your pastor engage directly. That's really cool. I'm glad he
it
does that.
is
I didn't know he
cool.
did that. Let's talk about the Connect card, the
Yeah.
getting of the info. That's a big step for guest connections. And right now, I'm sure many have pivoted. They've figured out ways to do this. But what are you seeing that's working for? I'm a guest at the live stream. How do we connect after this? What are you seeing?
Um, there's a lot of times where people post a link to it in the chat.
Mhm.
One thing that I have encouraged churches to do that I have seen a lot of people say that they're having success with is to not only post about and link to the digital online connection card during the broadcast, during the online services, but to also have it live on the homepage of the website. And
Mm.
so I blogged, I've done two special coronavirus church blogs recently at gregatkinson.com, but the one 2 blogs ago was about how your homepage should change and how it should look nowadays. And I linked to a lot of really neat churches that have totally changed their homepage to adapt and to adjust to what has been happening. But one thing that a lot of churches are doing is just leaving their connection card on their homepage, so that if I stumble across your website on a Tuesday night at midnight and you're not streaming a service, I can still fill it out. And they find that they're getting responses coming in and connection cards coming in just all throughout the week from people that stumble across their website.
Yeah. And this might be a good time too to just mention, I don't want to get into it, but mention going to something like MiniChat, MANY chat, and investing in a Facebook Messenger bot that can collect information that also can live on your website. I recently did that for a client, found it to be pretty easy to do. Just search some YouTube videos on how to do it, but it's free and you can do a lot of stuff with that. So a place where you can connect on Facebook with your live, all those things can be connected. Another, just option for you. I think that the digital connect card is got to be simple, right? For people that are in your live stream. So what is in that thing?
It depends on your church and your culture, but right now you really don't have to ask for a whole lot beyond their name and email. And then if you have any kind of texting options, then you would want their phone number. If you have a texting service like Text in Church or something where you send out information through text to congregation members, then you would collect their phone number. But and a lot of churches are using something like Text in Church during the service. They'll just say, hey, text I'm new to 55513, or text salvation if you made a decision, and so texting is still a great way to communicate through online church. And then, through services like Text in Church and other companies that are doing texting, you can do your online connection card through text.
Right.
What's cool about this season of the church, which is what we're going to be focusing on for the 2020 Fall First Impressions Conference, this new season. But what's cool about it is these tools existed. Like you said, you just did some YouTube videos, you found this chat bot feature, and you studied it and learned how to do it. Online giving, companies like Tithely and Pushplay and Givelify and all these companies already existed. There were already ways to do streaming. Church online platform that already existed. All this stuff was happening. It was like God used the global pandemic to connect the dots of, hey, you guys have all these tools and all these resources. Now start using them. And so my friend Jeff Reed, he's been using the term phygital lately about physical and digital. And so when we go back to normal, new normal, whatever that is, when we start to reopen churches and re-engage, we don't want to lose all this online digital leverage that we've been using, everything that we have relied on to get us through as a community, through online small groups and Zoom and daily devotionals from the pastor and online services and online campuses and online giving. We don't want to just shelf that and say, well, now we're back physical. We don't need that anymore. We want to keep the both and going, physical and digital. Let's keep both of those going and never go back to the pre-digital days. If you've been streaming for years, awesome. I'm glad you were prepared. If you just started, don't stop.
Yep. I think that's great. And that's a great segue into what I want to talk about next with you is what happens when we do go back to opening up our churches, and what does a reopening look like? And you recently wrote this blog called 10 Things to Ask Your Congregation Before Reopening. And I thought this was really good, a really great breakdown of some things you need to consider as you're reopening your actual physical campuses. So I wanted to break down through that. What are some highlights from that you shared in 10 questions to ask your congregation? What are some of those questions we should ask?
Yeah, so here I did an opening part before I asked some sample questions, And what I did with this blog was I wanted you to think through scenarios and questions. And then I didn't want to have anything proprietary. I didn't want to sell anything or have anything for you to download. I actually give you links to places like SurveyMonkey or Jotform or Typeform or Google Forms that you can go, or your church database, your CHMS, places where you can go and create a survey. I wanted you to be able to do that on your own and pick the questions that matter to you and your context and your state and your region of the country. But I gave you some things to think through. And so in the opening, I talked about basic stuff like, hey, if you're a church of 500, are you prepared for only 100 people to show up if 400 people aren't ready to come back out yet? If it takes 50 volunteers to pull off a Sunday, but only 10 volunteers show up, can you make Sunday happen with 10 volunteers when it usually takes 50 to pull it off? Like, are you going to do children's ministry? How are you going to keep the church sanitized and disinfected and clean in between services? Are you changing your service times because you need more time in between services to clean the church and to sanitize after a service? And so all these things to think through. Do you have the manpower to pull it off? Because not only do we want to make people feel safe and comfortable, but we have a great responsibility when people that are vulnerable or have weak immune systems show up to our congregation. Have we done everything we can to prepare for them? And then also knowing, I talked to somebody yesterday about that old concept, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, if you go through all this work, like a mega church did in Dallas, Texas, where you live this past weekend, and you're a church of 20-something thousand people and only 200 show up, was it worth it? Was it worth the work? And so just thinking through the timeline. And so what I did was I brought back the idea of an old school congregational survey that you can do for free on SurveyMonkey and just say, hey, if we were to open up services, would you even come back? Or what if we started with the drive-in service as a bridge where we're not in the building yet? And then what if we did house churches or small groups and stayed in small numbers? And then I would be thinking through starting with kind of the family service atmosphere. It'll be a while before children's ministry is going to be safe. And there's some great resources out there about that. I'm going to be recording a children's ministry podcast soon with Tom Bump, but William Vanderbloemen just did one where he interviewed some kids experts. And there's just so many things you have to consider. I've said for years, and I said it in my book, Secrets of a Secret Shopper, that children's ministry need to be clean, safe, and secure. Never has that mattered more. But how do you do social distancing with first graders? How do you keep these kids from bunching up and grabbing each other and hugging each other and playing together? How do you keep kids 6 feet apart? And so you're going to have to start with the family service right now. Yeah, it's going to be wild.
Those are incredibly great questions. I didn't even think about like the changing your service times to have more time in between so you can clean. Smart. Somebody else even suggested like adding services so that you could spread your people out so that they couldn't be as close together. It wouldn't be as crammed in your auditorium.
There's a lot of CDC guidelines and state recommendations that say you want to do 25% occupancy. So if your auditorium holds 400 and you have 400 people, then you want to have 4 services where you can have 100 per service. And then one thing that a lot of churches are talking about doing and talking about in my Facebook group is ticketing, that you actually do pre-registration and you have tickets for each service. A couple thoughts on that. One, you could use Eventbrite. You could use other ticketing softwares like iTickets. You can use Planning Center. You can use your CHMS. But if you're going to open up a service for 100 seats, I was just on a call yesterday with a large consulting company, and they were saying one thing that they're telling their clients is to undersell the service. And so if you want to keep it to 100 people for the 9 a.m. service, then only offer 80 tickets, because somebody's going to show up without a ticket. You're going to have somebody who says, I'm not doing a ticket, or a guest that shows up and just didn't know to do it, or somebody who wasn't aware. So if you're going to open up 100 seats, do 80 tickets and expect 100 to show up. And Yeah, lot to consider.
And that's what we did for when I was working at my last church. We had Christmas services
Right.
and several of those, and just we did the reserve your seat. We do tickets necessarily because people were
Reserve your seat. Yeah.
they bucked against that a little bit. We're like, tickets to Christmas? How dare you? I'm like,
Right.
come on, you know what we're trying to do here. So
Right.
we just did reserve your seat, and it was and then that was a problem. Like, which seat is mine? I'm like, just go get one. It's not what we're trying to do. But the point is that we always made sure that if we could fit 1,200 in the auditorium, we had 1,000, and we wanted to leave room mainly for guests. That was really because for something like Christmas, especially. Right now, I don't know how many guests you're really going to get. Probably same kind of ratio that you're expecting of your attendance you would normally
Right.
get. So if you normally had 400 and you're expecting 100, and you normally had 5 guests a weekend, you might get one. So you might look at it that way. But I think that's just wise to space things out like that. That's really smart. So this is a good blog. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes for everybody to go to, and it's got all the links to all those things that you just mentioned that you can go to and use. So I won't bother putting that in the show notes, but go to the blog that I will link in the show notes, and you can get links to all that stuff. So, Greg, I'm glad we got to finally do this. This has been really helpful. Any last parting shots of wisdom about reopening or guest experience in general for online?
I would say when it comes to guest experience and reopening, when you start back, I saw a church that opened this past weekend in Texas because Texas loosened their
Yeah, we
restrictions
did.
a lot quicker. As you know, Texas is its own country. I used to live in
Yeah, it is.
Dallas for 5 years. But when I saw this church and I saw pictures of their Sunday, everybody had masks on.
Mhm.
Every greeter, everybody in the parking lot, there were masks everywhere. And so if you're not prepared for that, if you don't have your hands on masks for volunteers, if you don't have hand sanitizer stations, you're not ready. And so think through all this, protect the vulnerable. Safety is very loving your neighbor right now. And so love your neighbor the best way you can. That's how to be hospitable right now, is to be prepared as possible. And then I saw another pastor at C3 Church in Houston who laid out a 5-phase plan, was very
That's great.
articulate, very intelligent, and just said, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. But get a structured plan together and really think through it and work the plan. But take it seriously, people. We're stewards of people when they come into our facility, when they come into our building. And so from a first impression standpoint, we want them to feel as safe and welcome as possible. When I've talked about first impressions over the years, I've talked about removing roadblocks and barriers and things that would confuse people or cause them not to focus on the message. The
Yeah,
same thing goes with health risk and sanitation. And so do everything you can to make people feel safe and comfortable and welcome.
that's great. Absolutely. Well, Greg, tell us where we can get in touch with you on social or online. How can we find you?
Yeah, my name is Greg Atkinson. You can see it in the bottom of the Zoom screen there, but you can go to gregatkinson.com. It's got links to all my social, but I'm Greg Atkinson on LinkedIn and Greg Atkinson on Twitter and Greg Atkinson on Instagram. And you can
Branded.
find me at several Greg Atkinsons on Facebook. But I was telling you before we started, I have been blessed with a large platform that God has given me of traveling and speaking a lot, and have a good size audience on Instagram, but I don't fully utilize it. So when I saw you were doing your Insta Summit, I wanted to share about that and tell people to check it out. I'll be watching it. I'll be taking notes. I'll be learning. I know that Instagram needs to be treated differently than Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn.
Mhm.
I am just bad at it, and so I'm blessed with some good followers, and I try to post some interesting stuff, but I don't optimize it like I should. And so I'm going to be watching the Insta Summit. I'm excited about it. I'm so glad you're doing it. Of all people, it had to be Seth Muse. It had to be you when it comes to Instagram. So thank you for doing this, and I'll be tuning in.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm really excited about it too. May 19th through 21st. And if you're listening to this podcast or watching this video after those dates, you can still go to theinstasummit.com and get a later pass and get access to all the videos and everything. So it's only $97 for that to go get access later. So anyway, I'm excited about that too. I think Instagram is really going to be the next platform for churches. It already is the third largest, and it's the fastest growing, and it is one of the best for personal touch, and one of the ones you can still get great organic reach on. So
Not only that, it's where we are headed, and
yeah,
we as a people, we as a nation, and we as the church. Because I'm a dad of 3 teenagers. I have a daughter in college and 2 in high school, and they are not on Facebook; they're on Instagram.
yep,
And so when I look at where we're headed and what will the future generation be on, they don't even have a Facebook account.
mm,
I'll say something to my son about, did you see this on Facebook that I posted? I'm not on Facebook.
yeah,
But they are on, all 3 of my kids are on Instagram. They
they
just
are.
don't do Facebook. So that's where we're headed.
Yeah, and what people don't realize too is that the biggest demographic on Instagram are the 30 somethings right now.
Yeah.
And the 30 somethings are the ones that have those young kids that are called those young families that all the churches say that they're trying to reach, right? And
Right.
so that's where they are. It's great to try to reach them where they are. That
Yeah.
just makes sense to me. Anyway, I'm excited about it. It's going to be great. Like I told you earlier, I've been watching through some of these videos and just fantastic content. Fantastic. So anyway, go to theinstantsummit.com. Thanks for that shout out. And
Yeah, man. I'm excited.
it,
I'm looking forward to it.
it's free if you can watch it on the date with us, but it'd be $97 to get the pass later. But Greg, thank you so much. This has been a really helpful, talk about guest services and just being welcoming in the online space, as well as some things to think about when we're reopening. So thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. I'm glad we made it happen.
Me
Thank
too.
you.
Me too. Go get the show notes for this episode at sethmuse.com/122. And we'll have all the links for all the things here or there in that place. So thanks for listening to the Seminary of Hard Knocks podcast, and we'll be back soon. See ya.